Johan och Martin Gott.
Welcome to the show, Johan.
Thank you.
Let's talk a bit about the structure of the Swedish election system and find out if it's the same or different from the Israeli system. In Israel, here parties must achieve 3.25% of the national vote to gain a mandate as a party to sit in the Knesset. Is there a percentage figure required by the Swedish political parties to make it into the Swedish parliament?
Yes, we have the same system, roughly, but we have a minimum level of 4% of the total national vote. But if you achieve 12% in one region, you will achieve one mandate, actually. So if you have, for example, one party, we have the new Islamist party Nyans in Sweden. If they achieve 12% in one region, they will get one mandate in the parliament, although they might only have 2.0 on a national level, on the total level. But it's roughly the same, yes.
Well, we have 13 parties in our last Knesset. We had 27 parties not represented. How many parties are running in this year's Swedish election, Johan?
We have the 8 parties present today in the parliament, and then we have, as I told you, the new Islamist party Nyans, which I consider they have a fair chance to achieve 12% in one region in the middle of Sweden, where they are heavily represented, or they might get even 12% in Gothenburg, the large Muslim community in Gothenburg. But after the election, I think we will have 8 or 9, 7, 8 or 9. We'll come back to that later on, but there's between 7 and 9 parties in the parliamentary system, in the Riksdag, in the parliament.
Okay, but my knowledge of the latest polling seems to indicate that the Social Democrats have about 33% support at the moment, and the centre-left currently have about that bloc has about 51% of the vote in the polling, with the centre-right at about 47%. Is that correct as we speak to each other about the beginning of August, with over a month to go?
Yeah, roughly. But if you look at the individual parties, the red-green, they have a big problem with the Green Party. The Green Party is in the polls below the 4% barrier, so to say. So they might be kicked out of the parliament. And if that happens, the conservative bloc will gain a majority, as it looks today. So it's pretty unsure. The Green Party is actually very, very unpopular in Sweden right now due to the energy crisis we have in Europe as a whole, and in particular in Sweden. About 20 years ago, we were self-sufficient with energy, but we're not today. We are dependent. The south of Sweden is dependent on Russian gas, actually, indirectly from Germany. It's a little bit of do or die for the Green-Red alliance, so to say, to maintain the power, maintain in power. The conservative bloc has also had a problem with the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party, under the former party leader Nyamko Sabuni, they were bouncing between 2 and 3%, but she resigned earlier this year, and now we have Mr. Johan Persson in chair of the Liberal Party, and they are up and nosing on 5% right now. So it has been a major success, switching so close to the election. This has never happened before, that if you switch party leader or the one in the party chair so close to the election that you can gain such a public support in the polls, actually. So he has been a major success for the party, and it seems like the Liberal Party will stay in the parliament. So everything, the outcome of the election is actually dependent on if the Greens can remain in the parliament or not. If the Greens remain in the parliament, we'll have Mrs. Magdalena Andersson. She will continue as prime minister. But if the Greens are kicked out, well, then we have a new prime minister in Ulf Kristersson.
What chances do the centre-right have of turning it around? I ask that because if the Justice Minister of the Social Democrat Party is not addressing rising crime, which was led to the no confident motion, I would have thought this reflects badly on the leadership of Magdalena Andersson, who is the current Prime Minister of Sweden and Social Democrat.
Well, Ms. Magdalena Andersson, she's very, very popular in Sweden. She is actually the most popular Prime Minister we've had for ages. And the way she handled the NATO application really strengthened her. And she has tried to distance herself from the party, actually. So you can see that what the Social Democrats, they want to get into a position where the election is about who is going to be the Prime Minister, Ms. Magdalena Andersson or Mr. Ulf Kristersson, instead of the Social Democratic Party, with all the responsibility and the rise of crimes and murders, and the high energy prices, the high inflation, a lot of problems, which you can track down to the former Prime Minister, Mr. Stefan Löfven, and the Social Democratic Party under his leadership. She tries to distance herself. She acts more and more like Angela Merkel. They even dress the same, actually, today. So we have got a new Swedish Kanzlerin. Actually, she's very, very popular, and I know her a little bit, slightly, and I like her. But I don't like the politics, actually, and I'm a pretty average voter right now that we dislike. Mr. Morgan Johansson, the Minister of Justice, and he's also responsible for the migration issues or migration politics together with Mr. Anders Ygeman. They are pretty unpopular. But somehow she has managed to distance herself, very, very skilled. And that's what the Social Democrats want to do. But the conservative bloc, they want to address the crime, the rising crime. They want to address the inflation. They want to address the actual energy crisis we have. We've seen the households, they've seen a double in energy prices in just a half a year. I look at my own electric bill and I can consider, okay, we have to adjust our habits back home. We're shorter showers. We kind of put out the lights earlier, and we do what we can just to limit the consequences of the energy crisis. And I think if the big issue in the election will be circling around the energy crisis. We still have a very, very high level of migration, a number of migrants coming to Sweden who is getting their asylums approved, asylum applications approved. And that's on the contrary to what's promised from Mr. Morgan Johansson. Mr. Morgan Johansson, he holds that, we have the most restrictive migration politics in Europe, but we don't. We're actually receiving more migrants now than in 2015. And so people, the ordinary voters, they don't get it. They don't get it. How does this sum up? You say one thing and we experience something else. And people are pretty fed up paying taxes and not getting anything back. I mean, what we are doing now, our taxes is actually they're financing migration. We don't get anything back. We don't get an increased production. We still have a huge, well, very high rate of unemployment. People going home, not going to work, and so it's a little bit tricky answering how would this sum up, because the Social Democrats, as I said, they are positioning Magdalena Andersson as the prime minister's candidate and focusing on her leadership, which is a good leadership from an international perspective. She has really addressed the NATO issue, which is still, even if we have applied now for membership, it's still a big question, and she gains a lot of credit for it. On the other hand, we have the conservative bloc, so to say, and they are trying to push through what we experience every day with higher electricity bills. We can walking in the city, we can see unemployed migrants getting more and more visible in society, and we have very healthcare system is actually on its knees right now. This will be a big issue in the election, so we'll see. Everything is dependent on how the Green Party survives the election campaign, actually, because they have been involved in all the most unpopular decisions made by the government Löfven on the migration and on energy, and that's, I mean, that is problems which we have to handle now and not in the future. And the government have a low credibility in those areas, actually, in those political areas, because, okay, you put us into this situation. How should you act when trying to get us out of this situation? And especially when we can see that you're saying something different now, but you're doing just the same.
I would question, in fact, whether you have freedom of speech or the public right to know. Let me highlight this by talking about the different aspect of migration into Sweden that is almost like clamped down or disinformation, and this is crime, violent crime, including, for instance, gang rapes of Swedish girls, terrorism, gun violence. I read a 2021 report that found that Sweden was the leading European country in which the number of fatal shootings per 100,000 inhabitants increased since 2000. Another one, that the Swedish homicide rate was higher than any of its Nordic neighbors. The sexual offenses that have been rocketing in recent years in Sweden. So, but when we tried to discover statistics of who commits the majority of the violent crimes in Sweden, it's very difficult to get to the information and the statistics from Sweden itself. Are they native Swedes, or are they as a result of the migrants who are still, at this time, a minority in Sweden? Are there any public statistics covering this growing phenomenon? Because I can't find any. Why the cover-up? Would you admit that the identity protection of criminals that keep the Swedish public uninformed are a deliberate political decision of the politicians that cater to and for the growing minority, and therefore have a vested interest in protecting the identity of ethnic minority criminals against the best interest of the public at large?
I'm of the opinion that it is a kind of cover-up, as you describe it, because if you look on the inmates in the Swedish jails, it's a majority in real numbers of migrants or children to migrant parents. And especially in the high security prisons, you have devastating majority of inmates with a foreign background. So it's all about the numbers. I mean, so I'd say I would agree upon your description that in most of the violent crimes, and such as robbery, armed robbery, murder, and other kind of assaults, and sexual assaults and stuff like that, or crimes like that, they have it's a majority of criminals with a foreign background, actually. So I mean, it's a no-brainer for me, actually. But it's not really allowed to say in public like I do right now to the Israeli public or audience. So well, it's a no-brainer. Sure, everybody knows it. It's like the elephant in the room. Everybody knows it, but no one dare to talk about it.
Sad. But under the watch of the Social Democrats and the leftist coalition, the outgoing Prime Minister admitted that, and I quote her here, segregation has been allowed to go on so far that we have a parallel societies in Sweden. We live in the same country, but in completely different realities. Johan, my opinion, I'm an outsider. This is a message of defeat. In other words, the Social Democrats, the Greens, and the left have created parallel societies in Sweden. Give me your opinion of that.
Yes, I agree. That's what I have had. In 2012, actually, I started to warn for this. This development, actually, that we had as early as 2010, 2012, we have the first really signs of it's an area outside Stockholm, one municipality called Botkyrka, another area which belongs to the capital called Järvafältet, or Kista, Tensta, and Rinkeby. They developed into a direction where you can actually they could be defined as parallel societies, actually. And I was called a racist by the party secretary, and a lot of other ugly words they used, and they tried really to push me out of the party. But now I got right. In the end I got right, but it's a little bit, now the problem is so severe that we have to address it in another way. We have enclaves, we have parallel societies which is dominated by radical Sunni Muslim groups, actually. And so the problem, we could handle the problem in 2012, but now I'm not sure we can handle it. It will take a generation at least to get Sweden in charge of Sweden, so to say, in these areas. Sorry.
Well, I'm beginning to hear somebody who prides himself on being a social democrat coming to a different opinion, but it basically parallels what we have been observing in Sweden, not just here in Israel, but other places as well, about what happens when you open your doors and allow in an uncontrolled and unbridled migration. Part of this appeasement, Johan, to the growing Middle East migrants has been the constant and growing anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian drumbeat. Look, Sweden has been anti-Israel ever since Olof Palme, and it became the leading anti-Israel European nation, even to the point of feeding Palestinian terrorism with unlimited amounts of Swedish money. Of course, it's not described that way in Sweden, but this is the way it happens, and we see it with the contributions to the education of children in UNRWA refugee camps, the teaching of a world without Israel, the hatred of Jews. And we see it in also the money going to welfare and the Palestinian Authority, which gets siphoned on to their pay-to-slay reward system. Johan, my prediction for Sweden is if there is no radical shift made in your September election, And this is a result of, let's say, strategic studies, like from the Israel Institute of Strategic Studies. In 10 years' time, instead of native Swedes running the main center-left parties and the right parties, they will be led by the migrants, who will be electing their own people to take over the established party, but they'll also be introducing their own social, cultural, religious, political parties with policies that will shock native Swedes who have surrendered, as I said at the beginning, their own traditional morality to multiculturalism. And that will be the time that native Swedes will wake up to the fact that you have sleepwalked to your own destruction. Do you agree or disagree with the basic premise?
I agree 80%. I would agree. I agree about 80%. It's if we boil it down to this election, and now a little bit, I align myself with the Social Democratic strategy here, that Miss Magdalena Andersson, as a person, in the way I know her, she's very, very close to Mr. Göran Persson, former Prime Minister, who is a really, really big friend of the State of Israel. They are about the same. I know some of Ms. Magdalena Andersson's advisors really well. I talk to them about once every fortnight or something like that. And they're very, very pro-Israel. They're not the Olof Palme. They are not representing the Olof Palme politics or the Pierre Schori politics or anything like that. But you are right when it comes to the effects of migration, because it was very, very close last year, by the time of this last year, that Stefan Löfven was replaced by, as exactly what you say, a person very, very hooked on this multiculturalism. But because this multiculturalism, it's actually feeding anti-Semitism in Sweden. That's my experience. When you talk about multiculturalism, the first ones to lose that battle is actually the Jews and the Israelis in Sweden. But Magdalena Andersson, she's committed to put on a fight against this multiculturalist parts of the Social Democratic Party, but she will not be able to address similar movements in the Green Party or the Left Party or the Center Party, which is more and more likely to fall into an anti-Semitic kind of rhetoric and politics. And I support Magdalena Andersson in her battle against this identity politics. But it's hard to say the outcome, but there is a saying actually, next year Jerusalem, and who knows, I might end up in Jerusalem. Actually, sorry, sad to say, but it has been a long battle, but we are losing it every day. We'll see now, the 11th of September, what will be the outcome of that. But
Johan, let me end with this question. How has the Ukraine war impacted Sweden politically? Sweden's applied to join NATO. Surely that will weaken the support for leftist parties in the next election, particularly Swedes who seem to be wanting to return to what I call Swedish traditional national unity. And it's interesting for me to know what the left party, the former communist party, thinks of Russia and Putin these days. And do you think that, with Sweden applying to join NATO out of fear of communist Russia, this will negatively impact their chances, their popularity of the left party in the next election?
Now, when our application to NATO is, they have received it, and Turkey has not. Turkey has enabled us to be present at the meetings. but they have not ratified it in the parliament. I think that will take at least 1 year from now. We have to wait until after the Turkish elections, actually, which is about to be held in June, I think. So I think our full membership will come at August at the earliest, or August next year. So, but this is really, really skilled of Magdalena Andersson, that she pushed a NATO application in very, very good time before the election. So the NATO applications is a non-issue right now in Sweden. It has and so the relations, so what's not being discussed, unless by Pierre Schori and Jan Eliasson and Hans Blix and other more loyal Kremlin supporters, what we actually, so we are not discussing the left party's relationship or with the Kremlin. We're not discussing the Green Party's relationship with the Kremlin and the other within that sphere. So I think the NATO discussion is actually a positive discussion from most journalists and most politicians in Sweden. So it's a non-issue. But if Magdalena Andersson had not been pushed the NATO application so hard, that would be an issue for the election. And she didn't want that. She didn't want that because the support for NATO is more than 60%. And it is a really, really important question for the Swedish voters. Myself, I'm a half Finnish Swede, minority in Finland. My grandfather, he was serving as an officer under Mannerheim, and my father, he was born and raised in Helsinki during the Second World War. We know the Russians by heart. We know what they're capable to. So what I would say is that, okay, we are not strong enough to defend ourselves then, and NATO membership is really something good for Sweden. And so I think she kind of erased the NATO question and unified Sweden against Russia earlier this year, and then she kind of got that question out of the way, and by that built herself a platform so that she had a possibility to win the election in September.
Johan, explain to me and the viewers the symbol you've got behind you, the hammer of the Sikh or whatever. It hardly looks to me to be a symbol that represents traditional Sweden.
Okay, that's a cover of my first book, The Islamism in Sweden. It's about the Muslim Brotherhood. I designed it myself together with the author Aron Flam, which I hope you read. This is a Swedish Tiger. Really, really good. He got the letter. Actually, I know Aron quite well. He got a letter from the President of Israel, just thanked him for that book. But he designed it for me, and it's, as you can see, it's a hammer. There's the communist symbol and the serpent and the colors of most Muslim nations' flags. So it's kind of the ideologies. They meet each other, and that's what my second book, which is due to be published in January, 20th of January, is the plan. I show how the ideologies, they melt down to one new political force, so to say, which Europe haven't seen for decades or for hundreds of years, actually. How communism or Marxism, post-Marxism, Islamism, and some really, really heavy thoughts from Martin Heidegger, who was the philosopher of the Nazi Party, how they kind of meet each other and form something new. So that's the symbol.
Well, Johan, I'll be happy to interview you about your new book come January when it's out. This is an interest of global interest. But earlier in the show, you told me that you were 80% on the way to agreeing with me where I said about the impending future of Sweden if radical changes aren't made in the new election. I would suggest that had I asked you this question about 4 or 5 years ago, you would have said I was 60% right. So it seems to be going in the wrong direction.
It is, as I told you, maybe next year Jerusalem. I don't know. Well, every time I meet Aaron, we talk about and then when we salute, when we take farewell, when we bid each other farewell nowadays, we say actually next year Jerusalem.
Well,
or in my case, actually, Rabat.
I look forward to meeting you when you come to Israel. I'll show you some of our problems when you're over here as well. But I really hope the oncoming elections are not going to leave you when I speak to you post-election of you telling me you are now 100% convinced that I was right. But Johan, thank you very much for sharing your political views and your observations with us on the show. And I look forward to actually to inviting you back post-election. Let's have a post-election get-together about.
Yes. Well, let's schedule that, actually. I think either way, there would be some turbulence forming a new government, but around the week after the election, I think we have a lot of stuff to talk about.
All I can tell you, Johan, is that we from Israel wish all the best for Sweden. You need a change of direction. I hope your Swedish voters, listeners, viewers, wake up before it's too late. Thank you, Johan, for being my guest and on the View from Israel.
Thank you.
אנו מכריזים בזאת